Okay, folks, today we're going to talk about the electrons and the periodic table. Should be a reasonably short podcast for you. Are you guys kidding? Am I kidding? Why do I have to remember all this stuff? How does it apply to anything? Who cares where the electrons are? Well, let's start at the end of that. Right? Why do we care? Well, how does it apply to anything? Chemistry is all about electrons. We don't worry about the nucleus. Really, we don't. Okay, because in chemistry, what's going on is when two things bond together, the things that are bonding are the electrons, or the things on the outside. The nuclei are very, very small and they're way in the center. They don't impact this at all. It's all the stuff going on in the outside. So chemistry is all about electrons. So everything we talk about for the rest of the year, until we get to nuclear chemistry, nuclear has to do with nucleus. So aside from nuclear chemistry, everything has to do with the electrons on the outside. So how in the world am I supposed to remember all this stuff? How am I supposed to remember these s orbitals are spherical and p-shaped dumbbell electrons and D's and F's are really goofy and what in the world do they mean? Where do I find them and how does all this apply? Okay? Well, that's what we want to do. Right? The first thing we're going to do, and I'm going to start simply by saying we have helium over here, and I'm going to move it. And for the rest of this podcast, helium is going to belong right here, right above beryllium, right, as number 2. So that's where we're going to stick it. So on the next slide when I draw, all of them are going to be over there. Also, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to flesh out the rest of this periodic table down here. Right? So I'm going to put boxes down here. Now at this point, they're all going to be empty because we don't have elements for those right now. But we're just going to leave them as just kind of squaring off our periodic table. Okay? All right, so let's look at the S block. We talked about the S block being spherical, and that orbitals can only hold 2 electrons. So here we have something called a 1s orbital, and that's an s orbital, and it holds these 2 electrons, number 1 and number 2. And then down here, this happens to be our second s orbital, and it holds 2 electrons, 3 and 4. Now we're going to ignore these guys over here for a while, and we're just going to look at these 2 columns all the way down. These 2 columns are always s electrons. So when I put in the first electron, it's going to go into a spherical shaped thing, and when I put in the second electron, it's also going to go into a spherical shaped thing, but when I put in the third electron, it's going to go into a spherical shaped thing, except it's going to be bigger. Remember in our last podcast we talked about a ping pong ball surrounded by the baseball. Well, right here, this is the ping pong ball. Right? And this is the baseball here. And down here, this is the softball. And down here, here's a basketball. And over here, here's a beach ball. Alright, so they just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. They're concentric spheres with the smallest one in the middle. It can only hold 2 electrons. So everything here we're looking at in these 2 columns, we're going to call the S block. Now what about the P block? Well, the P block, if you remember, it was dumbbell shaped. Right? We had one going in the X direction, one going in the Z direction, and then one coming out of the board kind of at us, and then going back into the board back behind us. Right? So that's a total of, there can be 2 in here, 2 in here, and 2 in here, and that's a total of 6 electrons, and you'll notice over here, this area over here is 6 wide. Right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 groups here, 6 columns, and those are our P block over here. And our S block was over here. It's these 2 columns for the S block. Like the spherical one, and the P blocks look like dumbbells. And they will come over here. That's these electrons over here. Right? Any guesses what's coming next? Sure, it should be the D block. Now the D block, if you remember, had 5 orbital shapes. And remember, each one can hold 2. That's a total of 10 electrons that we can hold. And that's these guys right here. These are your D block. And if you count them, they're a total of 10 columns. And this is your B block. right? Which leaves one more. And that's all the way down here. That's these guys down here. This is your F block down here. If you remember, there were 7 different shaped orbitals. 7 times 2 is 14 columns, 14 electrons. And that's where they go. Remember, these 2 guys go right up in here and split the periodic table apart. All right. So how can we draw hydrogen? What does the periodic table tell us? Well, the periodic table tells us that hydrogen has 1 proton and 1 electron. So when I draw it, I would put the proton in the middle, and then I would draw, this is kind of the 1s level, where I would draw the electron, and it's going to be in here somewhere 95% of the time. Occasionally you'll get one out there, but for the most part it'll be in there. So, what happens with helium? Well, again, what does the periodic table tell us? I'm going to work my way across here. Helium has 2 electrons, and they're both in the s level. But that tells me that if I have a nucleus, in this shell, this is my 1s shell, I'm going to have 1 electron, that's hydrogen's electron, and I'm going to have helium's electron because I need to have 2 electrons. And those electrons can be found anywhere in here. Remember, this is the nucleus in the middle. Right? And they're in this sphere. They're inside that ping pong ball somewhere, if you think about it that way. What about lithium? Well, remember what's going on is the first 2 electrons went in here into the 1s level. And this is now my second s level, so it's going to be bigger than my first s level. So in the center I have a nucleus, and then I have a shell, and inside that shell, 95% of the time, I'm going to find 2 electrons. Right? And those are going to be my hydrogen and my helium, my first 2 electrons, but then I have a 2s level, this is my 1s level. I have a 2s level, which is just a bigger circle. And 95% of the time, I'm going to find that last electron in here. And that's the electron that belongs to, that's the 3rd electron that's required to balance off lithium. Now, how would I draw it? Well, I might say that I have this dumbbell-shaped thing, which kind of looks like this. Oh, I'm sorry, no dumbbells yet. I'm still in my S level. Sorry, my bad. Okay. Beryllium, S level. These are both S levels. So my 1 electron, 2, 3, 4. So my first 4 electrons are in the S level, but it's in my first and my second S level. Okay. So, if I have beryllium, there's my first level, and it has 2 electrons in it. And there's my second level, and it has 2 electrons in it. Now things are going to get interesting because now we have boron. Boron is our 5th one. Well, our first 2 electrons had to go into a 1s level. My second 2 electrons had to go into a 2s level. And my 3rd electron, remember this is the p block over here, is going to go into a p orbital. So, it's going to start hard to draw these things. But here's the boron nucleus. And here are the first 2 electrons. And here are the next 2, sorry, pen isn't working, my next 2 electrons. And then I have this dumbbell-shaped thing, kind of going out like this. And there's 1 electron in here. This is the p block. That's a p orbital. Remember, they're dumbbell-shaped, and the other half of it's over here. So this electron is going to split its time between this dumbbell-shaped thing over here and the one on the other side. So sometimes the electron is going to be over here, and sometimes the electron will be on the right. So what happens if I go up to atomic number 6? Well, some of this is easy, so I should be able to draw it. There's my 1s level with 2 electrons in it. And there's my second S level with 2 electrons in it. And now I draw my p orbital, and it has an electron in it. This is number 5. And then the question is, what happens to my second one? Well, what's going to happen is that second electron would like to be in a p orbital as well, but it doesn't want to be close to the first one. So I could put it in this level, but it doesn't really want to be there. It would rather be somewhere else. And since we have a whole other p orbital right there, we can put that electron there. that is our 6th electron. We have 2 in the 1s level, 2 in the 2s level, and then 1 each in these p orbitals. Now, we still have a third p orbital, right, which is going to come out of the, and I'm going to just draw it this way. It comes out of the board lattice and then goes back into the board. Right? And there's nothing in that one yet. Okay. Well, there will be now, because now we're going up to nitrogen. So, to save me a bunch of time, nitrogen, we're going to add 1 more electron here. Now, this becomes nitrogen. What about the next one, which is oxygen? We have to add an extra electron. Well, remember there's only 1 electron in the p orbital that's going this way. There's only 1 electron in the p orbital that's going this way, and only 1 electron in the one that's coming out of the board. So I can add a second electron to that orbital, and that would give me oxygen. And then if I were to go 1 more, which is fluorine, I could add 1 more electron to this guy. And then if I were to go 1 more to neon, I'd have 1 more electron in this guy. So by this time I've got 2 electrons here in the 1s, 2 electrons in the 2s circle, and then 2 in each of my 3p electrons for a total of 6 more, for a total of 10 electrons. All right. And bounce through all that because I just did that. What happens with sodium? Well, if you look at sodium, my 11th electron, where's it going to go? Well, it's no longer in the p block. It's no longer in the dumbbell-shaped things. It's back in the spherical-shaped ones. If that's a ping pong ball, and that's a baseball, then that is going to be a softball or something bigger, a basketball. Okay? So that's where your third electron is going to go out there. Yeah, and you're saying, you got to be kidding, right? I've got to remember all this stuff? Are you nuts? Well, what do you need to know? You need to know where the S, P, D, and F blocks are. So, if you remember your S block is over here, remember that your S block contains both hydrogen and helium. Your P block exists way over here on the right. Remember, it does not contain either hydrogen or helium. Remember that your D block is in the middle. And finally down here, this is your F block. Okay? You do need to know those. You do need to know that there's one spherical orbital which holds 2 electrons. There are 2, 4, 6 electrons, or a total of 3 orbitals here. In the P block. I can't spell. And because there are 10 electrons here, there have to be 5 orbitals in the D block. And down here there are 14, so there have to be 7 orbitals in the F block. Okay, you need to know that. Okay, and you need to know where they are on the periodic table. So that's what you need to know. Might need to practice this a little bit. And if you have questions, see me in class and I'll be happy to help you.